What's up guys, today I'd love to answer the question that many of you have asked me. And the question is, Igor, how can I surpass 1600 rating in chess? And the thing is, many of you have played for months or even for years and been stuck on a certain level without being able to break through. So the question is, how do you do it? Well, the answer to this is just one word. It happens due to blunders. On that rating, especially if we're talking about online blitz rating, there are blunders all over the place, pretty much in every game from both sides. And I'm saying this not to criticize you, but as a friend of yours to show you what's possible. Because if you can get rid of that one thing, you can reach your chess goals in no time, instantaneously. Think about that. All your opponents are blundering in pretty much every game you play against them. If you find a way to make use of those blunders and to not blunder yourself, then you're instantaneously ahead of the crowd. You're an alpha male superhero, the world is yours, hooray. There are two types of blunders, and for the most part people aren't even aware of the second type, which is the most frequent and the most damaging. But let me first show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's go over a couple opening moves, and let's say here white goes queen to g4. Now, how would you play here if you're playing black? You may think about that for a couple seconds. The second most played move in this position is the move knight to f6, attacking the queen, and at the very same time blundering white's intent to grab this pawn on g7, so that is already the first blunder. Now after queen takes g7, white is here attacking the rook, and guess which move is the most popular in this position? That is the move rook to g8. And it may be hard to believe at first that most players overlook checkmate in 1, which occurs after queen takes f7, and yet it is exactly true according to the statistics, according to the database. Now I'll explain in a minute why that happens and how can you stop that from happening, but for now, let's just conclude that that is the first type of blunders where you hand a piece or overlook opponent's threat. That is what people usually mean when they talk about blunders, but there is also the second type of blunders. Right, let's go over the first opening moves rather quick. So this is the closed Sicilian, players play something, white attack the pawn, black covered, knight e2, attack the knight, black defended it. So here's a rather standard opening position. How would you play here if you were playing white? Which moves would you consider? Once again, you may think about that for a couple seconds, then we're going to discuss that. So one of the popular errors in this position for white is playing the move pawn to g3, aiming to fin cattle the bishop because you got to develop it anyway, and then to castle. Now the move makes perfect sense, but there is only one clear drawback. It is that it overlooks checkmate in 1 after knight to f3. It's a pretty nasty checkmate within just 6 moves, and yet it happened even to strong players. And when somebody plays a game like that, they usually think that it was just a bad luck. They just overlooked some, sudden move. But the thing is, that is in fact an extremely common thing, and it is the second type of blunders, the tactical blunder. And here, the situation you can see is slightly different. In this case, white overlooks strong response of your opponent. That's what I mean. So by playing pawn to g3, white did not overlook any black's threat, because prior to that move, there was no threat actually, right? Also, white didn't hang any piece. It's not that white played knight to b5 and, exposed it to being captured. So those kind of blunders, you may find it on lower rating levels. But if we're talking about the moves such as pawn g3, where the move itself seems to be perfectly fine, it doesn't hand a piece, doesn't overlook a threat, the move makes sense, but at the very same time it overlooks a powerful response of your opponent that ruins your position. So that second type of blunders actually occurs under 1600, under 1800, and in online blitz games even up to 2000 rating. That is a fairly frequent thing to do. And then you just suffer these kind of annoying losses, and that's why your results can be inconsistent, and that's why it's hard to ever reach your chess goals. At this point, sometimes students tell me, Igor, on my level, that just doesn't happen that way. People just don't blunder, checkmates in 1 like that. Which reminds me, an old nasty joke of doctors who say that there are no healthy people, but only under-examined people. Now let me show you what I mean by talking about chess. So let's go over this example, this opening, the Sicilian defense, something like the Grand Prix attack, and here after the trade of knights, it is white to move. Now, could you think about that also for a second, and think about the candidate's moves, the moves you would consider in this position for white, just like 2 or 3 options that you would find normal for white to think about. Okay, one of them could be a popular move, pawn to d3. Now, pawn to d3 is a normal development move, but the thing is that overlooks queen a5. So that's the second type of blunder we were talking about previously, right? The move d3 by itself does not really, lose anything, does not hand a piece, and it does not overlook a threat because the threat was not there prior to that move, right? But by putting this pawn to d3, you expose yourself to this double attack, queen a5. Now black attacks the king as well as the bishop. They're going to grab the bishop on the next move and get a winning game. Now, what happens in reality, though, is that if I take this move back and check stats in the database, the most played move in this position by black is actually not queen a5, but bishop g7. Black just continues with their plan. And therefore, the blunder remains to be unnoticed. If black just plays bishop g7, and let's say you castle and the game goes on, and now, unless you analyze this game afterwards with an engine, you'll never get to know that that was a blunder. And your opponent will also never get to know that there was a blunder in this game. But in fact, there was one, okay? So in reality, there are way more blunders that are actually noticed. So there are more blunders than you think in your games. And your opponents blunder more frequently than you think. Again, I'm saying this just to show you what's possible, okay? If you just start noticing that, start taking advantage of that, you're the king of the hill in no time. All right, now we're coming to the most juicy part of this video. How do you actually achieve that? So let me show you another popular opening. After knight f3, knight c6, and goes pawn to c3, the Ponziani opening. In this position, one of the really popular moves of black is bishop c5, going straight into white's intent, pawn to d4. And therefore, by playing this bishop c5 move, black is kind of helping white to accomplish their plan, play d4, strike in the center, attack the bishop, attack the pawn, and white is already significantly better in this game. Now, how do you prevent yourself from playing moves such as bishop c5 that overlooks a strong response of your opponent? Well, there are two major things, and one of them is the most critical. So the first thing is, after your opponent played a move, you could ask yourself, what is my opponent planning to do next? So that you're aware of your opponent's plans. Then it's, of course, a lot easier for you to watch over them and make sure he doesn't unleash some sudden attack on you. But I know that, it takes an effort to ask yourself about that all the time, and probably you won't. So for that reason, I'll narrow it down to just one technique that I would recommend that you implement in your games. And that is, when you realize which move you intend to play, do not just play it unthinkingly, do not play it automatically, but take a little time to ask yourself, is my move safe? Can my opponent attack me somehow? Can my opponent capture something after I play the move I plan to make? And if you ask yourself that question, then prior to playing bishop to c5, you ask yourself, okay, can my opponent attack me somehow after that? And then you will probably notice the move pawn to d4, and thus will not play bishop to c5. So that's a single thing that if you practice it and it gets automated, you basically get rid of the vast majority of your blunders, if not all of the blunders. And although it takes time initially, but think about that, grandmasters can play blitz games, even bullet games, without ever really blundering. So once you automate the skill, it just goes smoothly as part of your normal thinking process. You don't have to think hard about it. And one thing that I think puzzles people is that people tell me, hey Igor, I've played thousands of online games, I'm in chess for years, but I'm still blundering. Like, is there anything wrong with me? Maybe I don't have that specific chess talent or something like that. And the answer is completely different. I mean, for example, if I'm talking about my handwriting, it's rather ugly. And I've been writing a lot in my life, of course. So, just practicing something over and over again does not necessarily develop new habits. You just keep doing it the old way. In order for me to improve my handwriting, I would need to take the time and deliberately practice that skill, trying to do it slowly and accurately, right? Same thing with chess blunders. If you just play over and over again, you never develop that new skill. So what you need to do instead is to slow down a little bit and maybe play a couple moves, a couple of games where you play a 5-minute game or a 15-minute game even, and you just deliberately train that skill. You ask yourself, before playing every move, what are the attacking options of my opponent? And if you take some time to train that, then now you got that new skill, you acquired it. And after that, you can move on and play hundreds of thousands of more games, and that'll keep practicing that skill. But you have to first acquire it. Let's train your skills right now. Here we go with another popular opening. And here there's this nice tactical trick for white, which gives white an edge. And after this exchange, black goes pawn to d6, white goes pawn f4, aiming to push this knight away so that after that you can grab this pawn on g7, and black responded queen to h4 check. And here's a question for you. How would you play here if you're playing white? Please think about this and write it down in the comments below. Now, just to clarify, it's not a tactical drill. You cannot find a forced win for white here. I'm just asking you to find the best move for white, okay? One of the famous chess players said, I prefer sacrificing my opponent's pieces, and as you stop blundering yourself and start taking advantage of your opponent's blunders, that's exactly what you'll end up with. Now, as you clear your way of blunders, the next thing you may be wondering about is how to progress in chess, how to increase your chess mastery. And if you have that kind of a question, I would recommend that you check out my free masterclass by clicking the link over there, where I'm sharing with you my best training methods. Either way, wishing you the best rest of the day, and I'll talk to you soon.